everybody. My name is Scott Rutter. I'm the founder and president of the New Jersey Cannabis Business Association. Today, we have with us Christopher Fry, the founder and president of New Jersey Crowdfunding. But before we get to Chris, I want to thank our sponsors. So first and foremost, I want to thank Sprague Energy. They're our preferred energy provider. We have Financial Resources Federal Credit Union. We have Cureleaf, Burton Trent Public Affairs, HBK CPAs, Township Green, Protisas 420, Saks LLP, Dutchie, Puffin, Canna Remedies, and DM Labs LLC. So thank you all. Thanks to our sponsors. And look, we have a really exciting conversation to have today. I think a lot of us in the cannabis industry around the country and in New Jersey have started to realize in the past 6 months to a year that a lot of the funding that we thought would be available once people got their licenses, they're just not materializing. And it's not just a New Jersey thing, it's a national thing. And so who we have today is Christopher Fry, as I mentioned, the president and CEO of the founder and CEO of New Jersey Crowdfunding. He's going to share with us his technique for helping you raise your money. So Chris, I turn it over to you.
Thanks, Scott. Let me just real quick get my my screen share going here. There we go. Hello, folks. Thanks for joining us this afternoon with the crowdfunding NJ Lunch and Learn with the NJ CBA. Equity crowdfunding holds a lot of potential for small and mid-sized businesses looking for funding. It's a great new funding source for early stage businesses that very few people are aware of. And hopefully after we spend about a half hour this afternoon, you guys will at least be a little bit more informed about it. I'm going to go a little bit, I've got a prepared presentation because there's an awful lot of information to share. Pre-pandemic, I was doing these seminars and they took about 90 minutes. So I'm keeping it to 20 today. Or about 20, and it's going to be sort of the highlights, topside stuff, and I'm going to try and keep it kind of summary. But at the end of the presentation, I'm going to include a slide that has some URLs for where you can get some more information, and there'll be an email in case we don't address your question during the presentation. You can email me a question, so that'll be all provided at the back end. And so the way I'm going to hopefully work it is I'm going to just push through the presentation about 20 minutes. And leave enough time so that folks can have their questions answered, because usually there's lots of questions. Go ahead and send your question in as we're going, but just know that we're not going to address it until the end, if that's all right. With no further ado, let me jump into it. 3 key points that you should take away from today. Number one is there's three distinct categories of crowdfunding. When I talk to folks, usually they've heard about the first one, which is charitable and rewards. That's the Kickstarter, Indiegogo, GoFundMe folks. The second type is national equity crowdfunding. And then the third type is intrastate equity crowdfunding, which is what we do. I characterize what we're doing as sort of 3rd or 4th generation crowdfunding coming out of the groundbreaking portals of Kickstarter and whatnot. That's the first point. So 3 categories of crowdfunding. Equity crowdfunding is a brand new source of funding. Okay, so if you haven't heard about it or you've just heard rumbles about it, that's fine. There's new rules, new processes, and really in the kind of crowdfunding we do, new investors that are now participating in funding small and mid-sized business. It's coming on very strongly, and it's really, look out 3 years or so, and it's really going to be the way that small and mid-sized businesses are able to get their early stage funding. The third takeaway is that intrastate equity crowdfunding is really the best way for a small mid-sized business to get its initial outside funding. Again, little known fact, early stage funding is about 90% local, meaning the folks that write the checks usually live within about 50 miles of the company. A brief agenda here, going to give you a little bit more information on my businesses and myself. Again, some crowdfunding background, a little history, a little bit more detail on the distinct types of crowdfunding, and then some discussion as to why New Jersey crowdfunding works for New Jersey cannabis. I'll provide a couple of little fundraising, points and reiterate the key points. And then I've decided to put together a discount for the folks that are attending this seminar today. So we'll talk about that through the process. Little background on me. Founder and managing director of CFO Solutions. It's a contract CFO business. I've been doing it for over 25 years. It's basically helped to create this service offering. If you're dealing with accounting firms these days, most of them have some kind of a CFO service offering. In my case, I was dealing primarily with tech companies and family businesses, got themselves into some kind of a jam. They needed more financial horsepower. I'd step in and help out, working primarily with small, mid-sized businesses. I don't think I've had a client in all these years where there wasn't a funding need or issue. High growth companies, startups, and turnarounds. So this is actually what led me to starting and founding Crowdfunding NJ. With all the SMBs I've been working for over the years, really the funding sources available were very limited. Companies in a lot of cases weren't bankable. So you were faced with, pitching to wealthy individuals to see if you could get them to take a significant part of your company and provide some cash. When equity crowdfunding came along, I said, this is a great opportunity for small, mid-sized businesses to have another resource available. So that's what got me into the equity crowdfunding business and why we're talking today. Further details on my background, just real quick. I was a divisional CFO at KPMG. I worked for W.R. Grace in a new company they'd formed, Grace Cocoa. We were the world's largest processor of cocoa beans. So I got to travel the world on their ticket, and I started my career with PwC, another major accounting firm. Educationally, I got a BS in accounting from Lehigh. I have an MBA from Columbia. I'm a New Jersey CPA and a chartered global management accountant. So that's a lot of initials. The takeaway from this is I've been doing this for a long time. I know what I'm talking about, and hopefully some of the information I share with you today will be useful to you. This is just sort of call it a mission statement, if you will, about what Crowdfunding New Jersey is doing. And I'm just going to read it. We help New Jersey companies successfully navigate complex state banking and SEC security rules and regulations, and we develop a complete and compliant New Jersey equity crowdfunding offering. So a turnkey offering for our issuers. Some of the services that are included, we start by providing advice and counsel on New Jersey equity crowdfunding. What are the options? Is it really viable for your business? Inevitably, there's some housekeeping that needs to be done with the legal entity that's raising the money. So we will help and do that, governance and compliance issues. The core offering package is we do all that, the disclosure docs, investor docs, term sheets, the digital offering itself, and then offering financial and marketing collateral. And of course, we then provide a secure portal for displaying your offering and processing the transactions. We also ensure that the offering is in compliance with all the securities laws, both New Jersey, SEC, both the rules, regulations, and exemptions, and we will manage the campaign for our issuers. So it really is a complete package that we provide, and I call it a turnkey package because we do all the heavy lifting, and that's important. A little bit of history here. Statue of Liberty was crowdfunded. In terms of today, the charitable rewards crowdfunding that started in 2008, the national SEC crowdfunding that came out with the Jobs Act in 2012, and I've indicated the major players of those types. And then the third type, which is the interstate, and New Jersey equity crowdfunding came on the scene in 2015 with Crowdfunding New Jersey. Little known fact, the base of the Statue of Liberty was actually crowdfunded. The people of France gave us this terrific statue back in 1876, and it was paid for actually by the people of France. So it was felt that the people of the US should pay for the base. It was a great idea, but they only raised about half the money needed. And they needed, in those times, they needed another $100,000. So the owner and publisher of a New York paper, which was provided nationally, it's Joseph Pulitzer of the Pulitzer Prize fame. He offered to anybody that sent in a donation, he would put their name in the newspaper, and he did. And he was able to raise the balance of the money needed for the base, about $100,000 in 6 months. So crowdfunding's been around for a while. It's just been updated using today's technology. Back in those days, you used a newspaper to get it. Nowadays, you're using portals. There's separate portals for each type of crowdfunding. I mentioned the big names earlier, the Kickstarter, GoFundMe, Indiegogo. These are, you've seen them. If people have heard about crowdfunding, it's usually this type. They're helping in a charitable way, or somebody's raising money for something and they're offering, t-shirts or hats or whatever. But this type of crowdfunding really opened the door to us being able to do what we're doing today. And the portals provide the platform for fundraising and transaction. And little side point here, and that is a lot of folks that have heard of crowdfunding, they always hear about some kind of a fraud story or whatever. More than 95% of those type of, bad actors, if you will, come out of this type of crowdfunding. So it's really the charitable and reward space where you see the bad actors, not doing what they said they do with the funds. The second type of crowdfunding, the national SEC crowdfunding, came out of the Jobs Act of 2012. This is just the different titles that were embedded in the act. There's actually 3 types of national equity crowdfunding. So in total, there's 4 types of equity crowdfunding, 3 national, 1 state. And these are, Title II is the Reg D, which is basically for accredited investors, and they can raise, I think, up to 10 million bucks. The Title IV is what they call a mini IPO, is the Reg A+. Again, mostly for accredited investors. And I'm assuming that most of you folks know what an accredited, it's an SEC term for basically wealthy individuals, the 1%er crowd, if you will. And in the case of the A+, I think they can raise up to about 75 million. The type of crowdfunding that we do here in New Jersey is sort of a derivative of the Reg CF stuff. This was the crowdfunding, in my opinion, that really sort of broke through, because it was for small, mid-sized businesses. At the time, you could raise up to $1 million. And the key here was that anybody could participate in investing in these companies. And that was huge, because really up until this point, this sort of investing was limited to accredited investors. So the takeaway here is there are actually 3 types of national SEC crowdfunding. Again, you have separate portals, for each type of crowdfunding or category or whatever. Each type of crowdfunding has its own portal structure and rules and regs. Most of the national portals will handle all 3 types of the SEC crowdfunding. A couple little differences here is that the issuers themselves have to prepare the disclosure and investor doc. So right out of the gate, you're having to hire attorneys and accountants to get those packages of information done. Usually the national portals require that you bring also a certain base amount of investment already. Before they'll open up their portal to their investor base, they require you bring in somewhere between $50,000 and $100,000 of investors yourself. Their fees range between 8 and 21%. And importantly, the national portals also cannot do cannabis crowdfunding. And the reason for that is their financial backbone is also based on the national banking system. So they can, like the banks, they cannot be doing cannabis crowdfunding. Every now and then a cannabis company does get on a national portal, but as soon as they discover the cannabis offering, they have to take it down. Which leaves us with new intrastate equity crowdfunding, or in our case, New Jersey equity crowdfunding. The law here in New Jersey is pretty simple. First of all, it's New Jersey companies, New Jersey investors. The transaction stays within the state. New Jersey businesses can raise up to $1 million. New Jersey residents, in the case of cannabis, 21 or over, can invest up to $5,000 in any offering. So if there's 10 offerings, you could put $5,000 in all 10 offerings. If you're an accredited investor, New Jersey has carved out a little special rule for them. And that is there's no limit to any amount that an accredited investor can put in. And they're not included in the cap. So just to provide an example, if you've been talking with some private equity folks and for whatever reason, they couldn't put together a syndicate, but there were a couple of guys interested, those guys are probably accredited investors and they could participate in your crowdfunding offering. Let's use the example where there's 2 guys and they each want to put in 100,000. They could participate in the crowdfunding offering and you'd be able to raise up to $1.2 million. So that's how that works. Again, with New Jersey crowdfunding, we can use any kind of an entity, meaning a C Corp, S Corp, LLC. There's no limits there. Generally, the private equity community likes C Corps. And there's also no limit on the kind of investor instrument we can use. So it can be stock, it can be debt, it can be safes, it can be revenue notes. We're almost limited by we're only limited by our imagination, which is kind of interesting. We have to comply with all the New Jersey and the SEC rules, regs, and the exemption. Not to repeat what I said earlier, but basically the crowdfunding NJ, our portal, we will handle all that. So we deliver a turnkey product that takes this, we do all the heavy lifting, and it takes this off of the plate of the issuer, which is which is significant because these rules are somewhat complicated and you have to comply with them. So as I mentioned earlier, all the docs and whatnot, and we've managed the campaign, and we also maintain the compliance, make sure that the offering remains in compliance with the rules and regs. Who can fund New Jersey cannabis? Well, I think you've all discovered probably that the banks cannot. They can't handle deposits and transactions. There's some conversation out there about the SAFE law. Even if the SAFE law passes, it's not going to change the bank's ability to fund. Okay, it's just the banks are not there as a funding resource. Even if they could, then you bump up against the fact that you're a new young company, and the only way they'll fund you is through fully collateralized and guarantees. Is private equity funding really out there for New Jersey cannabis? Some of the things that are occurring out in the call it the national market are affecting their interest in funding New Jersey cannabis. I call it the national cannabis market crash. That might be overly dramatic, but the things that we're hearing and seeing in the press about what's going on in the other states is not encouraging as it relates to attracting the private equity community. And because of what's going on, so that's on the cannabis side. And the general economy side, everybody's tightening their belts, and there's not a whole lot of startup funding that they're doing. And essentially, your cannabis business is an early stage startup company, an SMB. So the cannabis business aside, they're just not funding these kind of early stage companies. Things more locally that impact them is they're not necessarily fond of the ownership restrictions on the New Jersey cannabis, but it is what it is. And they feel if they're going to be putting money into an early stage, small, mid-sized business, they generally would like a higher ownership percentage. These folks, they're going to want management, some kind of participation in management, board seats, usually weekly, sometimes daily reporting on what's going on. They truly are going to be a partner that's sitting there kind of helping you run your business, good or bad. And the real cost to the founders of private equity, you peel through all this stuff, is the ownership percentage that they're going to require. They're going to require a significant ownership percentage. And that, if the business is successful, which we all hope, could be a sizable number a couple of years out. Interestingly enough, the upfront costs for dealing with a private equity funding, you're going to have to hire attorneys and accountants to check over the documents, make sure there's no issues with the NJCRC. That's going to cost money. And those costs are actually very similar to the upfront costs that the offering costs that you'd have to pay for New Jersey crowdfunding. Sorry about that. One of the reasons why New Jersey crowdfunding works for cannabis is that our crowdfunding follows the New Jersey Bureau of Security rules and regulations. That's who we have to make sure we're in compliance with. In addition to that, there's some SEC rules, but it's all under one sort of umbrella. And interestingly enough, those rules and regulations are very similar to what the NJCRC 1730 rules had put in place regarding investors. So the way I got involved with this is once they started issuing the conditional licenses about a year ago, folks looking for funding found my portal, which I said I had developed basically as a way of helping my CFO clients get funding. And it got me looking at what was going on with the cannabis. And I looked at the rules and regs, and I was very surprised to see that everything that they were requiring, which is a little bit extensive, and other funding sources don't like them, but we actually, it's fine with us. We actually built the portal with a lot of those reporting and requirements in place. So it was not an issue for us, which is interesting. The other thing was, because the transaction remains in New Jersey companies, New Jersey investors, we have none of the federal banking issues. So a lot of the big hurdles that other potential funders have, we don't have. Regarding investors, I won't say all, but the New Jersey crowdfunding investors will be passive investors for the most part. If you bring in an accredited investor, we have to take a look, but that's going to be a rare exception if you run into an investor that won't be a passive investor. So again, the amount of information reporting needed to be done on the investors, we've got it well in hand. Because no investor, investor capped at $5,000, he's going to have a fraction of a percentage in terms of ownership. So there's no management control issues, no board seats, and the level of reporting that you need to do to your crowdfunding investors is really very minimal. It's quarterly reporting. They have 6 data points that need to be provided, and you can put the report on your website. So it's really a very minimalist amount of reporting to these investors. Regarding the funds themselves, they come in and you can basically spend them however you see fit. Spend them on build out, inventory, cash flow, whatever. You would have disclosed what you're planning to spend the money on in the disclosure docs in the offering. So, but there's nobody looking over your shoulder telling you you can't spend here, you can't spend there. There's no collateral, no guarantees, and no SEC involved. Again, this just reiterates what I shared earlier about the services we provide. You know, we do the whole package. We set it all up for you. Interesting fact, and one of the last bullets is that we can have a crowdfunding offering live within 30 days from what I call the start meeting. If we decide to move forward with the crowdfunding, we schedule a start meeting, and 30 days from that meeting, we can have your offering live and on our portal. And then an additional 30 days later, we could actually start releasing funds from escrow. And that, you know, it kind of depends on when the first investors come in. There's a 30-day window there. So you could conceivably be using investor funds, you know, in about 60 days from the time we have our start meeting. And you can continue to run the crowdfunding campaign until you've achieved one of 2 benchmarks. Either you've achieved your maximum goal, which in a lot of cases is just $1 million, or 1 year. But so it's interesting that some of the early funds that come in can start to be used within that 60-day window. Just a little bit overall on fundraising. I'm just going to share with you because I've got the floor here. First of all fundraising has a cost. Okay, so if you thought that fundraising was free, I'm sorry to disillusion you, but there is a cost to it. You know, whether it's the amount of ownership you have to give up, it's the cost of accountants, attorneys, brokers, or in the case of crowdfunding, the offering costs, there is a cost there. Fundraising is going to take longer than you think. You think you can raise the money in a month or two, double that or triple that, because it's a process that you have to go through. In my 25 plus years of working with small, mid-sized business, I have never had a client that raised too much funding. So don't worry about the fact that you might be raising too much. Just go for the money, get it in-house, and don't worry about getting too much money. That's usually not an issue. Usually private equity will undervalue the business. Historically, that's the case. They'll ratchet down on the value, and conversely, owners generally overvalue the business. So the right answer is somewhere in the middle. The private equity community doesn't mind wasting your time. You could have a series of meetings and a process that runs out over 2 or 3 months, and then all of a sudden you get a phone call or whatever, and they say, "I'm sorry, we're not interested anymore." In the meantime, you know, you've lost 2 or 3 months on the clock that you've got regarding, you know, your conditional license or whatever, and your needs for funding. So time, you know, they don't mind wasting your time, and time can be a problem for you guys. Just overall, you should pursue all possible funding sources, not serially one after the other, but in parallel. If grants are something that you can participate, by all means, go for it. If you've had some good discussions with some private equity guys that you trust and think you can move forward with, continue those. And think of a New Jersey crowdfunding. We can have this all going because we do all the heavy lifting. And I've had this conversation with others. They're spending their time talking to a couple private equity folks that they feel they could actually raise some funds with. In the background or alongside that, we're actually putting together the crowdfunding. So that's you know, pursue your funding sources as aggressively as you can in parallel. Again, the key points from earlier: 3 distinct categories of crowdfunding. Equity crowdfunding is a brand new funding source. It's coming. It will be the future. 3 years from now, it's going to be probably the primary source of funding for SMBs. And intrastate equity crowdfunding is usually the best type of equity crowdfunding for an SMB. Discount. I've put together pricing. I started working with some of the cannabis companies. 10-10 pricing, I call it. We have offering costs, which have to be paid our vendors on the front end. And for the cannabis businesses, I was able to work out offering costs at 10,000. Okay, it sounds like a large number. In the world of fundraising, it's not really. If you raise $1 million, it's 100x on the 10,000 that you had to put in. And then we get paid on the back end. It's what I call the campaign fee, and it's a percentage of funds raised. So, you know, we've got skin in the game in terms of your offering, and we don't get a fee, or we're not successful unless you're successful. What I thought I would do for the folks that are participating in the Lunch and Learn, I thought I'd provide a 10% discount off of those fees. for the participant. So a 10% discount off the offering cost would take it to 9%, the campaign fee from 10% to 9%. But the kicker is that we have to do it within the next 10 business days. So if you're at that point where you're ready to move forward with the funding of this kind, by all means, complete our PII form. It's the green button on our website. And as long as we schedule the start meeting by 2 weeks from today, which is June 16th, I'm happy to provide these discounts. These are the additional resources I mentioned at the front end. Our overall website for just more information or more detailed information on New Jersey crowdfunding would be crowdfundingnj.com. If you're interested in doing a New Jersey equity crowdfunding, you start the process by completing a PII form. It's crowdfundingnewjersey.com/complimentary. That'll take you to the form, and it's about a one-pager. You can send that in. They all come to me. If you've got a pitch deck or a summary business plan or whatever, by all means, attach it. Happy to look at it. Any information that you provide us is covered under our NDA, so we don't share information. If you want to see we have 2 cannabis offerings right now up on the portal. Same website, crowdfundingnj.com/portal. That'll redirect you to a very highly secure portal where the offerings are, and you can see the 2 cannabis offerings. Take a look. You're gonna have to create a login, some limited information, name, address, email address, and phone number that gets you in. You can look at the offerings, and everything that you see in the individual offerings. That's what we do, with the exception of the video. We're not allowed by law to participate directly in the marketing. We provide an awful lot of coaching and side advice, but we can't directly do the video, but we can certainly help you get there. But the important thing there is, if you look at these offerings, you'll see exactly what we do in terms of providing the turnkey campaign for you. And then finally, if we don't get to your question, or if you got some other information, or I was planning on providing some of these charts today as a PDF, and if you'd like that, just email us at cfnjsupport@crowdfundingnj.com. That'll give me your email address, and I'll put together this package and send it out in the next couple of days. Happy to send it to you. With all that behind us, that's what I got.
That was great, Chris. That was super informative. Thank you very much. We did get a lot of questions, so I want to jump on the questions while we got everybody here. So not in any particular order, but what is the maximum amount of money that can be raised?
$1 million.
$1 million. Okay.
And that's by law. With the caveat that I mentioned earlier about any funding that comes from an accredited investor doesn't count towards that cap. So as I said in my example, is if you had a couple of wealthy individuals you've been talking with and they couldn't put together a syndicate to do a full private equity thing, they can participate in the crowdfunding, but any money that comes in could be on top of the $1 million.
Okay. And then there's a similar question that was asked. What happens when you reach the maximum? What other options are available? So, in this case, if there's $1 million maximum, are there any other methods that they can raise money through your organization?
Unfortunately, no. And this is hard coded by law. So the one of the things I've been doing is that it's entity based. So some of the folks that I've been speaking with have more than one license. And so one of the strategies that we've discussed is you could put one of the license in one entity and the other, in the case it's cultivation, manufacturing, whatever, and put the other license in the other entity. And we could then conceivably do 2 crowdfundings, each of which has its own $1 million cap.
Gotcha. Okay. And then how are those equity shares issued? So so I know you went through this, but just like mechanically, what happens next? So I go and I put my company out there and I put my numbers together and people are interested in my particular project. And then people decide. So $10,000 here, $5,000 there. How is it being managed?
Sure. Let me just walk you real quickly, and I might get a little bit in the weeds. Just pull me back out. The process that we go through is, it keys off of what I said was the start meeting. We sit down across the table and we figure out, basically we decide what a fair valuation is for the business, what kind of investment you want to take in. Is it a common stock, a preferred stock, a debt instrument, whatever. We work all that out. What kind of a coupon do you want? And that then becomes the offering vehicle. And what happens with, and so then we have the offering in place and people can make their investment. We provide the pricing and everything else. And what happens from the investor side is you put the word out by social media. This is truly, a funding of the age, if you will. The whole communication with your potential investor group is really social media, email driven, blogs, friends of friends, that kind of thing. Because again, the people that are going to invest in an early stage company have some kind of a connection with the business, second, third, fourth level connection. And the way the process is that you get them, you say, look, we're doing this offering. You want to participate. You want to be an investor in the New Jersey cannabis business. Go to the portal and you provide the portal URL. You'll see our offering there. Watch the video. Most of the people, interestingly enough, 70% of your investors, all they're really going to do is watch the video, right? Because they're predisposed to wanting to participate because they've come to the portal. They watch the video and they say, you know what, this is kind of good. I like it. I want to do this. And they click the invest button. And then from that, the invest button, the invest process takes about 30 minutes. They're going to actually, from the time they arrive at the portal to the time they're funding their escrow is usually about 30 minutes. So they watch the video, they say, you know what, I want to do this. They click the invest button. It takes them through, the paperwork involved. There's actually going to be a subscription agreement. It's all handled by DocuSign and packages out of DocuSign. So they get the paperwork done again in about 5 or 10 minutes. And then the last step is they do a funds transfer to the escrow account. And the funds will sit in the escrow account until certain goals are achieved relative to the offering. You've got to get to the minimum point, if you will, and then we can talk about releasing the funds from escrow. And that's the point where you would then, let's say we use a preferred share instrument as the way of getting the investor. Once the funds get released from escrow to the offering, to the company, we have 60 days to then issue, in my example, a stock certificate to the investor. And so it's very straightforward. We're there all the way. We're guiding the process. The actual creation of the investor shares, someone at the company needs to do that, but we're going to have all the information relative to who's the investor, what name goes on the certificate, where do we send it? But that's sort of kicked off by the release of funds from escrow. And I got a little bit deep in the weeds there. I apologize.
That's all right. That's all right. We love weed, so it's okay. So the other couple other good questions, and we will have to wrap this up soon. But there's a good question. Do you have to report your investors to the CRC? So there's a threshold where 5% of the company or greater has to be reported, and so most of these would probably fall under.
Exactly. That's actually one of the great things about when I was talking about the rules relative to the Bureau of Securities and the CRC. We're going to have the information that the CRC requires. I looked at what they were requesting, regarding investors. We will have that as part of having them as an investor in a crowdfunding. That we were required to do that anyway by the Bureau of Securities. So we had that investor information in the database in the portal. So if it was needed to be provided to the CRC, it's right there. It's not a big deal. But because most of the investors, I would say 99.9% of the investors are going to be passive, it's not required.
Excellent. That's what I thought. I appreciate.
Yeah, no, it's a great
question.
That
research there.
That has been a big hurdle for some of the other kinds of investors.
Excellent. All right, a couple more. We have one question coming in. What stage of the process do I have to be in order to start crowdfunding? So as an applicant, as a conditional license holder, as an annual license holder, when should I start?
You can start as a conditional license holder, okay? And this is, again, kind of another neat aspect to this, because some folks say, well, I don't want to run into trouble with the NJCRC in terms of bringing investors in. And technically, because you could start the process, and it's, it takes 30 days to get the offering live. It takes another 30 days for there's probably funding in the escrow account to release. So you're talking there about 2 months. And technically, until you've actually released the funds from escrow and issued stock, you have not brought in an additional investor, if you think about it. So the investor is not part of, because you can cancel your crowdfunding and return their funds at any point until you've actually released the funds from escrow. So it's, and that's been an interesting conversation early on for folks that were talking with private equity. They said, well, what if my private equity guy comes through and I'm in the midst of my crowdfunding? I said, well, we can stop the crowdfunding, return it. As long as we haven't released the funds, we can return any funds and we can close out the crowdfunding campaign and you can move forward with your private equity guy. But, and you can sort of look at the crowdfunding campaign as a little bit of insurance, for that private equity guy that talked to you for 6 months and then said, sorry,
Okay. Then one last question.
Yep.
And then we'll continue on. But one last question. So does it have to be equity only? Are there other options like debt service or other types of things?
Again, that's actually one of the neat things about the New Jersey crowdfunding laws is they allowed for any kind of investment vehicle. So stock, debt, safes, which is a creation from the West Coast. It's basically, it's sort of a soft loan until there's a future equity event. Revenue notes, which again are popular from the West Coast. So I had come up with a vehicle that I call leaf notes, which I won't go into right here. But again, the point is that no, we're not limited to just stock, and we can do just about anything that makes sense.
Very good. Very good. All right. Well, Chris, I want to thank you very much. There's a couple more questions that have popped up. I'd encourage everybody to reach out to Christopher Fry, New Jersey Crowdfunding. Before I thank our sponsors and before you go, Chris, I want to talk about, we have an event coming up on June 21st. We'll be celebrating the summer solstice and we'll be celebrating Pride together. It's one of our typical business and networking events, but there's a lot to celebrate this month. And so I encourage everybody to attend on June 21st over at Johnny Mac. And it's a fantastic place. We've been there several times, so I know it's a great location and I know you'll all enjoy it. And then, so I also want to thank our sponsors. I want to thank, again, Sprague Energy. They are a preferred energy partner. I want to thank Financial Resources Federal Credit Union. I want to thank Curaleaf. I want to thank Burton Trent Public Affairs, HPK, CPAs, Township Green, Proteus 420, Saks LLP, Dutchy, Puffin, Canna Remedies, and DM Labs LLC. I want to thank you all for your sponsorship. Guys, we are going to put Chris's presentation and this entire video will be available on YouTube, and we will be pushing that out via our newsletter. So Chris, again, I want to thank you very much for your time. Very valuable information, and the timing is right now because people are struggling to find their funding, and this is a very awesome and unique opportunity to raise money. So thank you, Christopher Fry.
Absolutely. We're glad to be here and glad to help out.
And remember, you can reach out to Christopher directly through New Jersey Crowdfunding, and guys, get started. All right. So thanks, everybody.
Take care. Have a good weekend.